Well, folks, welcome to another edition of Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. And this, I tell you, this is long overdue. This is a gentleman that I've known, since about 1989, at least that long. He seemed to have come out of nowhere from Montreal and wound up in Halifax and really took the scene over. Very, 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 very good friend of mine, Mr. Niko Quintal. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
Couldn't be better, man. Couldn't be better. And I replaced you in Kid Wicket when you left to go to, I believe it was
Yeah.
Lettinger. I replaced you, so that was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. That's one stat I didn't know about.
Well, there you go. So I'm sure there'll be more. I'm sure there'll be more. So you're we'll go into what everything, but you're currently back in La Belle Provence.
Yeah, that's right. I've been back here. Well, actually, I've been back in Montreal. I went back to Montreal in 2002 with a couple of hiatuses. I went back to the Maritimes, as a matter of fact, for a couple of years out of Moncton, New Brunswick.
Oh,
And then I came back to Montreal, and then in the end, moved back to my hometown of St. Hyacinthe, where I was born and raised. And just before the pandemic. So in hindsight, it was a very good decision. And this is where I founded my drum school here in St. Hyacinthe. So
and we're going to spend a lot of time on that shortly.
yeah.
Very interesting what's going on there. Well, we will cover it again, but how long, I guess, from the time from concept to when it actually started, did it take you to put that together?
Well, I never planned on making this a life project, but being confined here in Saint Hyacinthe, and all the trades that I'm familiar with, one being a musician, organizing events, or the restaurant business, and etc. Everything took a pretty heavy duty dive, and I ended up started playing drums again more regularly, but the instrument is big, and it was in a very small room in my parents' house at the time, and I needed to expand. So I figured, well, if I need to play drums, other people may as well be in need of playing drums and needing a room, or maybe they need some lessons and etc. So I got on the old iPad and designed a small space where I could, maximize on the space, and designed it so my big kit would fit in there, but also a few other kits so I could share, and not share only the instrument, but also the knowledge and the passion. So, and it just took off like a bullet. I started in this January of 2022, and on this day, I have a waiting list at the moment. So, and I don't even have a sign on the street or anything like that. I do a lot of social media. I don't have a website. I'm going the old route, the analog route, like any good analog rock drummer from the pre-MTV kind of mentality,
No Pro
old
Tools.
and crusty style.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been following it. And again, I'm going to get you to totally break it down in the next segment and explain it to us.
Sure thing.
And it sounds to me, you and I I think had kind of similar things with the whole lockdown, because I mean, I was playing and then there was no playing. I was doing a radio show, couldn't do the radio show. This Barstools thing comes out of that. Away we went. And I just kind of found little bits and pieces of stuff that I could grab, and that kind of just became this thing. And it sounds to
Well,
me
you
like
have
kind
to,
of in a
man, and you
similar
did
path.
well. Hats off to that, because this is a great podcast, and I'll definitely be sharing the love here, and bringing traffic to you, because there's a lot of good things happening, and it's a great service you're doing to your region and the musicians, and everybody in your area. So kudos to you, my friend.
Well, thank you so much, man. So when I said you kind of came out of nowhere, so you came down here, you're playing with Tony Collier and those guys. You just kind of
Yeah,
you
the Collier
they're
brothers, man. I
right, that awesome guys.
love
Um,
those guys.
you kind of showed up and you kind of had this flamboyant flair when you like. I mean, so some guys were kind of doing. I was one of the hair metal guys. You kind of showed up and you had that kind of Neil Pearty type flair, like you were you were a technical player. and you were very flamboyant when you played. But you're one of the first guys, and I said this in a post. You're one of the first guys that I saw that did a lot of the fast snare off the cymbal stuff that kind of wasn't going on around here. Who would be some of your bigger influences when you're growing up playing?
Well, you may be surprised, but I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy. Of course, Neil Peart, like most people in that day and age. But I will be bold and honest and say that Phil Rudd is a huge influence for the four on the floor. He does it like nobody else, and this guy just swings. Just go back and listen to Power Age. That's my favorite record. It's so fat and it's mean. Who do I like? I like Frank Beard also, the old ZZ Top stuff, like Tijas, I think it's called, or Tias. Vinny Appice is one of my main guys, especially on the Live Evil record.
Yes.
Which led to the Dio era. So a big fan of his. Scott Rockenfield, I gotta say, in that time, in that day and age, it was really big in Quebec. Even with the first EP, I remember going to college and a friend of mine, one of his best buddies was fan number 27 on the the fan club. Anyway, so yeah, it's a mix and match of all of these influences. I got into jazz later, but like for the early influences, that's what it kind of looks like.
And I don't know if you remember this, but I remember so when you play with those guys, you had everything up kind of high, and then when you went to play with Ettinger, you lowered things, and you were the first guy that started talking about shoulder problems.
Yeah, man, even back then, huh?
Well, and I remember, and that would have been 89, 90, and lo and behold, didn't I start have rotator cuff issues, and I've done the same thing. I've kind of lowered my. You still experiencing that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got epicondylitis up to the yin yang, so I have to wear a brace when I play. So of course, I don't have the same dexterity as I used to as a younger player, like most people do. I mean, the body grows a little bit older, and you can't unless you're Buddy Rich. That guy got better with age. I don't know how he did it, but he's Buddy Rich and I'm Buddy Poor. Let's just put it that way.
Fair enough. Me too. So and then you and Steve Hennessy and the boys, you make your way out west, and there were some things that happened, but you wound up in this little band called Rhymes with Orange that really seemed to take the country by storm. What do you remember, I guess, the most about that? That was probably a little bit of a different style of playing for you than you had done previous. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, actually, when we got to Vancouver with Ettinger, the band kind of disintegrated. Paul Craig left the band. Then there started to be a rotation of players, and I left the band myself about 2 months in. So we got there in the spring of 1990, and by a few months later, I was already on another mission. Shaved the old head, and that became my look since the Mr. Clean look. Incidentally, I'm wearing a white shirt. Look at that. It's a sheer luck and determination and vision and then audacity too. I was ready to do anything to play drums and to further my career. And cover bands obviously wasn't the way. And we had grunge pushing us out of business, basically all the long-haired people. So I figured, well, if we can beat them, join them. And things moved really rapidly after that. I got involved with a band that had a developing deal with A&M Records, and it so happened that the head of the label was the owner of Little Mountain Sound Studios and Vancouver Studios, where a lot of the big rock records were made at the time. And before you know it, I'm in the same rooms with Aerosmith and Motley Crue and the Scorpions and AC/DC, the Cult. It was surreal. I mean, you just you play covers from these bands, a year before, and before you know it, you're hanging out with them. So it was a bit surreal, especially from somebody with my background. I didn't really speak English. The Collier brothers taught me English, and
That's a
Frank
sad
Zappa, of
statement.
course.
That's a sad statement. So you had a good one with those guys, and I remember seeing your videos, quite a lot on Much Music and what have you.
Yeah, just
How
that's
long
a
was your run
lifetime
with those
ago,
guys?
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How long was your run with those guys?
With Rhymes, well, actually, I got into Rhymes with Orange first. I got Stevie in second as a sound guy. And we had an incident on the road involving, married people, and the keyboard player decided to stay at home and be a lawyer. And I told Stevie that the space was vacant, so he filled in he fit in like a glove, and the rest is rock and roll history. We did the. I joined in 1992, and around 1997, I was playing with a lot of people. So Rhymes had already become a side project, but it was a main project for, I would say, a good 4 years, from 1992 to 1996, approximately.
So when you got out of that, and your next move was what?
I went with Kim Bingham, who's known for her work in Mimum and Morgenthaler, underground punk rock band from Montreal. She was married to Stephen Drake, who's the guitar player for the group Vancouver group Odds. And Rhymes had supported the Odds on tour before, and Stephen Drake had produced numerous records, including the Tragically Hip and Marcy's Playground, and etc. And needed a drummer for a session, and he so happened to call me up for Kim, who he was married to, and I ended up playing with her for 18 months approximately. We did an arena tour with Moist and I Mother Earth back in the day, across Canada, and then we ended up doing the West Coast American tour for Lilith Fair. And the lineup was fantastic. It was one of the best tours I've ever been involved with, like heavy duty players like Tracy Chapman and her band with Danny Fongheiser on drums, and the guys that had played with Dylan. And I thought I had stories, until you meet these guys.
Yeah.
And we ended up in California. That was my first time in California. We ended up with a showcase at the Viper Room, and hung out with Johnny Depp. He so happened to be there that night, so we had a lot of fun with him. And then after that, I went back into recording mode with Stephen Drake there again, but for a francophone singer that's from here in Montreal that I knew by name but didn't really know her music, France d'Amour, and she was slated to do some recording in Vancouver just to see how it went with Stephen Drake. And Stephen knew that I spoke French, obviously. So he said, "Hey, would you mind sitting on those sessions?" I'm like, "Well, of course I'll do it." And it became my most favorite and my most cherished period of my musical life. We ended up doing the first track, Gelled, and it became the first single. And we did that in Vancouver. And then we decided to transfer the whole operation to Le Studio in Morin Heights, which is known, as you likely know, for Rush recorded most of their records there, and the Police, and all kinds of people like Keith Richards and David Bowie. So there again, I thought I had good stories until I met that bunch of guys. Like if the walls could talk there. But there's it was just a wild ride. And then I went home for Christmas, 1997, 98. And somehow Bruce Allen, superstar manager for Bryan Adams and Michael Bublé, and etc., called me up at home. I don't know how he tracked me down, but he says, "Niko, it's Bruce Allen. Hey, do you want to play clubs? And we want to play. You want to play some small rock and roll your whole life, or do you want to go play some rock? I got a Conline Crush that needs a drummer, and we need somebody solid for for a mission that we have that's gonna require a lot of time. So it ended up being an 18-month tour with Econoline Crush nonstop. So we started in March of 2000. Oh no, March of 1998. So we embarked on a club tour with some American bands in the U.S., smaller clubs, but well attended. It was well promoted. And then we got on tour with the Foo Fighters and Green Day for a stadium tour. And before you know it, we're in Atlanta, getting ready to go home for Christmas. So we're going to deadhead from Atlanta to Toronto to take planes to Vancouver. And maybe 12 hours notice, Bruce Allen calls us. He said, "Well, call your loved ones. You're not going home tomorrow. You're heading to Boston, and you're going on tour with Kiss for 2 months." So we're like, "Holy shit!" Like we're just like a bunch of little kids. Just, oh, look at that, Destroyer.
Yeah, the 40th anniversary reissue. And I did know you went on that tour, and that would have been their, I guess, farewell tour.
It was a Psycho Circus tour.
Oh, was it?
So
nice. Okay.
Yeah, it was with all of the original members, Ace and Peter Criss, and obviously Gene and Paul Stanley. And I have a lot of stories about that tour, but that's for a different podcast.
The ones you can't talk, the ones we need a lawyer present for, right?
Yes, lawyers and priests probably.
Yeah. So just before we wrap this segment, because I want to spend some time on your
Yes.
project, Danko Jones. How long was that gig for you?
Danko Jones was like the best quickie you've ever had in your life, man.
Nice.
Well, for me anyway. Few people know that, but I was the band's agent at the beginning of their career. So these shows that I had booked, they had Gavin Brown on drums at that time, who's a fantastic drummer for one thing, but he's also a major producer. Produced Billy Talent and 3 Days Grace and all these bands. Who I was also agent. I was booking 3 Days Grace and Billy Talent and all these bands out of Toronto at the time. And I never even told Danko I was playing drums before, and certainly not playing drums opening for Kiss, his favorite band. So when they needed a drummer like right away, so I said, "Well, maybe I can help you out." So, "Oh, Niko, you play drums?" Well, I said a little. So they said, "Well, why don't you come in for a tryout?" So I brought in one bass drum, one snare, one floor tom, and a cowbell. Obviously, a couple cymbals as well, and it just clicked, man. It just took off. And a week later, we did a show at the legendary Elma Combo in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And this show, I mean, you had to be there. It's the best show I can say that I played in my entire career. And I did play Madison Square Garden. I did play, the Maple Leaf Gardens and all kinds of arenas, the Sky Dome in Toronto. But this was the crown jewel because it was so packed and so full of energy, and it was just plain nasty. And Danko was at top of his form. He wasn't big, he was on his way up. And we did close the Maple Leaf Gardens. We were the last concert there. We opened for Beck, and then the lights went off, and the Leafs moved to ACC, and Maple Leaf Gardens became a mall. Basically, I think it became a Loblaws.
Yeah, it's Loblaws. I was up there. So, I was up there a couple years ago, and yeah.
Still good friends with Danko to this day. We pick it up once in a while, and I'm really grateful for being a part of his career, because for me it was like kind of buying my rock and roll soul back after compromising a lot of time with playing with click tracks and playing with artifices and stuff like that. With Danko, it was bass, drums, guitar, nastiness, rock and roll, and there was to it. So and then so that lasted all of 3 months. It was very brief.
Nice.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break in this thing. We're going to come back and we're going to fill it up with what you're doing now.
Wicked.
We'll back after this.